Okay, this is going to be the third and last part to this video lecture. Um, and this one's going to start with physiognomy. And there's a lot of this section of this chapter that I don't feel is very necessary for this class. So we're going to kind of hit a few things that I think are important, but then there's a lot of other stuff that I don't want you to worry about too much. So physiognomy is relates to the affective perception of persons, places, objects, actions, and words. Now in psychology, the word affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, is not does not mean to affect something. Affect in psychology relates to mood or disposition. So what this really means is physiognomy really relates to the mood that results from the perception of persons, places, objects, actions, and words. Now, what the creative writer does is they translate subtleties in life into perceivable narratives that result in physiognomy. So, what this chapter focuses on mostly relates to, honestly, it comes back down to one of the basic things that I've tried to drum in your head several times, um, which is the importance of sensory details. You know, including sensory details is what creates physiognomy in narrative writing. And because of that, it's what hooks the reader, it's what keeps the reader engaged, it's what draws the reader in. And it also results in a sense of synesthesia. Now, synesthesia is a psychological disorder in which one sensory stimuli creates the perception of another sense. This is actually incredibly common in musicians. You can Google synesthesia in musicians, and many of the musicians that you know have synesthesia. And the most common form of synesthesia is when music or sounds in general create the perception of colors. A lot of musicians, Pharrell has synesthesia, and he's written a lot about it, that when he's creating music, he actually trusts his synesthesia. He sees colors whenever he's composing new music, and that's kind of what he uses to guide his songwriting and music production. But synesthesia, well, it's not true synesthesia, but a synesthetic type of experience results from reading and also from the act of writing. So when you're reading something, you are literally reading words on a page and translating those into images in your brain. But not just images, but also sensory experiences. And that's kind of the magic of writing, is that as a writer, I can put words on a page that you will then translate and interpret deeper meaning to, and that you will associate with parts of your life, emotions, memories, those sorts of things. But then also as a writer, this I never really thought about this until I read this book, but the medium in which writers compose has a synesthetic quality to it. I never write by hand, ever, but some writers do, and the example that they give in the book is that I forget who it was, but this writer said that he likes to feel the words as he's writing them. I guess I'm kind of the same. I actually prefer to write on typewriters for several reasons. When you write on a typewriter, you have to stop and think about every word that you're going to write, because it's not easy to correct mistakes. And I like that because when I write on the computer, I write very fast and I spend a ton of time revising. But when I write on a typewriter, what I write is generally finished, and then I just type it up on my computer, and send it off to wherever it needs to go. But also, I like the touch. I never thought of it, but I actually like the feeling of the keys of a typewriter, and I like the sound that it makes. I like the sound that typewriters make. Um, so that's something to think about in your own writing. Maybe you write you like the feeling of writing by hand over a computer, or maybe you like writing on a computer. Um, Now, going back to all of this synesthesia stuff, kind of um, comes back to the importance of sensory details. Now, I'm not sure if we talked about this in class, but the most emotionally evocative sense is smell. Um, Describing a smell, or even actually experiencing a smell, is the best sense to trigger memories and to trigger emotional responses. I honestly do not know why. I probably knew it at some point when I was an undergrad and studying psychology, but I don't remember why that is. But the sense of smell is most closely linked to our emotions and our memories. Okay. All right. So the creative process and the writing process. I combined these two sections of the book because I already taught you my uh, my beliefs and my version of the creative process and the writing process. And some of this stuff kind of reinforces what I taught you guys already. You know, they break down the example that they give that's really interesting is that I like is I have to get to that chapter, but they use this anecdote of Alice, and that she's so used to at the beginning of chapter 9 that she's so used to the teacher giving her the ingredients and then she mixing them together and coming up with the result. Writing is not like that. You have to find your own ingredients, mix them together how you want to, and hope that the result is what you want. Um, Interesting though, and then we go into they give these. It starts talking about writer's block a little bit, which I'm going to cover in the next series of video lectures. But it also deals with kind of the process of writing, where the creativity comes from, those sorts of things. I'm going to tell you a quick little story. So the book that made me want to write is called The Los Angeles Diaries. It's a memoir by James Brown. I picked this up randomly in a used bookstore in York, Pennsylvania. And it's the memoir of a writer who both of his siblings committed suicide. And his struggle, he's a writer and a professor in California at UC San Bernardino. And it's his struggles with alcoholism and cocaine addiction following his sister's suicide. His brother committed suicide when he was younger, following his sister's suicide, and his own suicidal ideation. Now, because he was a professor, I was actually able to track him down and send him an email and tell him, and I told him that I was like 22 at the time, that this book changed my life. It made me want to write, blah, blah, blah. And he and I still keep in touch, which is really cool. It's a fantastic book. But he told me, this was maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, I was battling a very severe case of writer's block, and I reached out to him, and he told me that writing is 10% talent and 90% hard work and determination. I was really struggling with the thought that I wasn't good enough to be a writer, I wasn't talented enough, but it really comes down to hard work and determination. And that leads us directly into the stages of the process: planning or pre-writing, generation, drafting, revision, editing, proofreading, publication, or presentation. What I do think is interesting in this chapter is the creative problem-solving model as it relates to creative writing. Now, to break that down, it basically kind of the nuts and bolts of this psychological model is that creative writer starts with snippets of information, an image, a couple lines of dialogue. And this is very true. Whenever I hear something interesting, whenever I hear somebody say something, or I have a random idea, I actually text it to myself. And I have this ongoing thread of text messages to myself in my phone of just random ideas, random pieces of dialogue, an image. And I collect all of these things because I know that it's important and I will use it at some point. It will either generate a larger story or I will use it in a story that I'm already working on, something like that. So I start with the snippets of information. I realize the importance of that information. And at some point in the future, I will string the information together to form a narrative, whether that's incorporating it into an existing narrative I'm working on or beginning a new narrative based off of this information. So what I'm getting at with all of this stuff is that, especially with the ingredients and the creative problem solving model, is that as writers, you guys need to collect experiences and collect information. You should always be cognizant of what's happening around you, and you should always be observing and collecting these information, collecting these ingredients, collecting the experiences, collecting the snippets of information. And at some point, you will use this in your own writing. Now, the psychology of creative problem-solving model, I'm going to try to go through this very quickly so that we can finish up. It has been found, research has found that creative writing, actually, writers experience a sense of heightened awareness, almost like a high when they're writing. Time seems to pass much more quickly. They seem to be more, not to be too ephemeral, but they seem to be more at one with the universe when they're writing. And this happens to me when I write. I can sit down and write, and when it's going well, I won't realize it, but 6 hours will have passed, and I feel absolutely high at the end of it. The writer that they quote in the textbook says that they find themselves in a state of total communication. I don't know if I feel that way, but I definitely find myself in a state of pure, like, artistic energy. And it is addictive. And as you know from the earlier parts of the book, that writers tend to have addictive personalities. So the high associated with creative output services those addictive personalities. And when you're in that place of total communication of, pure artistic output, whatever you want to call it, a lot of that involves improvisation, delving into your subconscious. And I really like this phrase that I can't remember the writer that said this in that they quoted in the textbook, but they find themselves almost at the edge of language. Now, this results in how I want to end this whole video lecture, which is that the thing that pisses me off the most about student writers is that they will say, I don't know how to describe it. It's your job to figure out how to describe it. You're not the first person to have this difficulty. Every writer struggles with this every day that they're writing. You have to find the right words to describe it. You have to use the sensory details. You have to create the image. You have to create the synesthetic effect in the reader. You have to figure out how to convey that meaning. Whether that's, stringing together the information, improvising, delving into your subconscious, eavesdropping on conversations, whatever you have to do, you have to figure out how to convey that, okay? So that's it for this series of video lectures. Stay tuned for more.